It's time for another daily drop here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting and analyst, longtime college AAU and high school coach, Mr. David Sisk, who also serves in the same capacity for the Kentucky site in the Rivals Network. So there is no other person on the planet that I would want to talk to about the Kentucky-Carolina game that takes place tomorrow in Atlanta and as part of the CBS Sports Classic than our very own David Sisk, who, by the way, great mailbag this week with our subscribers. David does these quite often, and it's an incredibly high value item that we run on the site, and I know a lot of people appreciate it. And you can have access to that, by the way, for just $8.33 a month for a one-year subscription. And the beautiful thing about Rivals advancement technologically is you can buy it as a gift now. You can gift for other people, and this is the time of year that people give gifts. So if you have a passionate Carolina Tar Heel fan, you need go ahead and sign up, give them the gift, or you're Kentucky, do it for the Kentucky folks. Help Justin Rowland and his boys out over there at the Kentucky Rivals site. Okay, David, Carolina and Kentucky Saturday. Before we get into the game, since we haven't actually done a podcast since the games started, and we're going to pick them up a lot more now as we're knee deep into the season, I'd like to get your thoughts, just what you 9 games in, some of the things that pop out to you, both good and bad with this Carolina team. Let's start with the good.
First of all, I think it's probably since I've been covering this site with you, and this would be my fourth season, that would have been covering, obviously this is the third year of Hubert Davis, and we would take the last year of Roy. I like this team better than any of the others so far at this stage. Obviously, the team 2 years ago caught fire late in the year, but you're talking about a month in. I like this team easily the best. I think it's a top 20 team right now. You have the old faithfuls with R.J. Davis, first of all, is to me the best guard in the ACC, and I've said that. And it just looks like the buckets, like a barrel watching him play. You know, you're disappointed if it doesn't go in. He's averaging over 26 points a game his last 5 games. Baycott, it's really weird with him. You have people asking all the time what's wrong with him. But you look at his numbers, you're talking about a guy that's going to lead North Carolina as probably the second all-time leading scorer and leading rebounder, and he's right on average. So he's averaging a double-double. His field goal percentage is not as high as it's been. In fact, it's about 10% lower than what we've seen in the past. And I think that's the thing people look at. He's missing some shots around the rim that people have kind of taken for granted. But, his numbers at foul line, his foul line numbers are about 10% higher than they've normally been. If I said his shooting numbers were 10% higher, that's wrong. But they're lower rather. But they're lower than they've been in the past. But he's making foul shots, so that kind of offsets that. I love Harrison Ingram. Man, he just does so much. You're talking about guys shooting 46% from the line or from three-point line, and then they're backing him down in isolation, just like old school 90s basketball, what it looks like to me. So that's impressive. Elliot Cadeau, 3-to-1 assist, almost 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And I really like the lineup. It seems like they mesh together. It's as free-flowing as it's been since I've been covering them. So that's something I like. They're getting enough off the bench right now. How deep they go with that, we'll see. But I would just like the energy, the ball movement, and kind of just how these guys mesh together. So, I like the team, and they're enjoyable to watch. I can't think of any time last year, the last year with Roy, the first year, I didn't enjoy watching that team. It was fun to watch North Carolina late in the year, Hubert's first year, the Final Four run. At no time, I would rather had a root canal or colonoscopy than watch the team last year. And this year, I mean, they're fun to watch. So we've not been able to say that, but I like the way they're playing together, and the talent's good.
Yeah. And before I ask you about the concerns, I want to comment on Armando. Armando is who he is. And I think that's the thing. I think people are expecting something different. And I do think he needs to be more efficient around the basket. But at the same time, he's quicker. So he's doing more stuff on the floor to help them. He's setting better screens now because they're not so obvious. They're not plundering screens like before, where a team could call out the screen was coming an hour before it actually happened. Everything he's doing is a little bit more decisive. He is also learning how to play with Harrison Ingram, and he has acknowledged that a couple of times, David. He said, "Look, Harrison's a totally different four than I've ever played with before."
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for Armando. When Harrison starts backing in his guy in, Armando doesn't still really know what to do. If he was able to consistently hit a 15-footer, he could step out and that would be an option, but he doesn't have
He's
that.
on opposite. He's down on the opposite block when he do
he
that.
just goes.
So if there's now one thing he does, and I'm a big believer in this. I think when you've got a physical guy at the four who can play, and Harrison Ingram can do that, I think he takes some of the pressure off the center.
Yeah.
Now, I think as teams game plan and they see how important Ingram is, that's going to happen more and more. And I think Baycott gets freed up a little bit. So right now, there's telling, hey, beat us one-on-one. And Harrison Ingram's doing a lot of that with the isolation game. But I think that because Baycott is who he is and the outstanding college player that he has been, that he is, teams can't go double Ingram. So I think it's allowed. I think Armando Baycott in this isolation game is the best thing that's ever happened to Harrison Ingram.
I agree with you on that. And I think another factor here, and this is part of the concern, some people are pretty concerned about Cormac Ryan shooting, although I looked at every game he played at Notre Dame and I wrote a bunch of stuff before the season and even said it in a podcast or two that he was streaky at Notre Dame. You have to live with the streakiness. So when the nights that he's on and other things are clicking, they could beat anybody anywhere and maybe by double figures. The nights that he's not on, you got to find other ways to get some of those points. He's still going to help them because he could drive. He's a much stronger driver from the top than I think a lot of people realize. He did that at Notre Dame. He fills lanes really well at Notre Dame, and he's fearless. So he's going to find some ways to score some points, but it's that perimeter shooting, which is hot and cold. And what I've noticed the last couple of games, and clearly UConn did it, they sensed, okay, this is an off night for Cormac, and they started doubling Armando. Armando got looks early, and then he didn't get a lot of looks later, and they started doubling him a lot of like what teams did a year ago.
Andrew, I've said this. I did an interview with a Lexington Herald leader about this game with Ben Roberts, and I said that. And I'm also doing a piece about the game for the Kentucky site about North Carolina. And I'll also, besides this, be doing one for Tar Heel Illustrated about the Kentucky team that should be ready about Friday. But anyway, I said this to the Lexington Herald leader and the Cats Illustrated that to me the key is Cormac Ryan, because watching the UConn game, I was like, all right, you're getting great play from Baycott, and from RJ Davis and from Ingram. And I think all but 17 points were scored by those three. And I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, where's the fourth score at? And Ryan had 6 points that game. But Ryan can do that. And I've said he's the key because he's the same guy. I believe he had 31 points between Tennessee and Villanova with those two games. He had the injury. So, he's the guy. He could go for 6. He could go for 20 Saturday. And if he's the guy, he doesn't have to go for 20. But I'm telling you, if he has 12, 15, somewhere in that range, it makes North Carolina an entirely different team. And I spoke to an individual that's very close to the North Carolina program. And you look at that game, and that's why I'm saying North Carolina could play UConn tomorrow. And I love the UConn team. And you know how I feel about Danny Hurley. I picked them to win it last year.
Yeah.
They could play again, and it could be a totally different game in North Carolina's favor because the coaching staff was hoping that Cam Spencer would be the guy who went 1 for 8 against Kansas. Well, he let North Carolina up. And then you have Cormac, who struggled. They
Yeah.
could play again tomorrow,
And
and
have that
Cormac Ryan
reverse.
could have 23. And, and Spencer could go back to that guy being 1 for 8. Oh, you got a totally different. Carolina coaches are certainly hoping that he is able to put it together and score some points Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That game could be flipped. And Spencer struggled against Kansas. Party was hobbling that whole game too. He's a gutsy player. All right, I want to hit on a couple of another concern. I want to get your take on this. And you and I have not talked. I've been so damn swamped the last 2 months, 2.5 months, that we actually haven't talked. And
the football
my
cave, for anybody's wondering, that's your term. All I have to hear is football cave, and I know what's going on.
Well, I've been in a football and basketball cave here lately. So one of the content items I ran for Madison Square Garden, I had to use USA Today photos. Our photographer wasn't up there. It was a photo of Armando guarding Cam Spencer on the perimeter, like out in front of the UConn bench, I believe it was. It was in the second half, 3-point area, left wing. And I ran that photo because I think that's part of the problem. I think that it's not that switching's an issue, but I think that they switch maybe too much. And sometimes they're really soft switches. It doesn't affect you switch, but it doesn't alter anything. It doesn't change the course of anything. And one of the things that has been a little bit of an issue with this club, especially the last 5 games, they've been a smaller team the last 5 games, which is rare for this program, but they have been. And there's this new defensive philosophy that the players have talked about where they sort of invite the dribble into the lane, but they want people to take long 2-footers. So they want to protect the 3-point line, which they've done a fairly good job of for the most part. They want to try to protect the basket, and there's still drives that are getting to the rim. But a lot of times you with these switches, you're getting 6-7 guys like Dalton Connect from Tennessee shooting over 6-foot guards because of switches. So it's an easy shot from 15 feet in the lane. So Armando, in my mind, should never be out there guarding a point guard on the perimeter. I know that Armando's quicker. He's leaner. Armando would love to think he can guard 1 through 5, but I don't think he can. Most bigs can't in college basketball. Plus, it's not optimal because if he's out there, that means a shorter dude, especially with a short lineup, is down in the post. And that to me is an issue. What do you think about the way they play defensively and the amount of switching they do and how much soft switching they do?
You've read my stuff. What's the biggest issue I've made about this team to a negative? It is.
I haven't read all of it on Pro.
It's been that.
Swamped, but I think this is their biggest. I think that their weakness that will keep them from advancing far is that I have not seen a group yet that when they got to slap the floor and lock down defensively, they can get a stop.
You go back last summer and read my stuff, and when the back and forth was going on about whether Elliott would reclass or not, I said the one concern, number one, the talent is there's a great talent in the backcourt, and you can read it on Cats Illustrated site when I do the critique of the North Carolina team, that it's a small backcourt, but it's an incredibly talented backcourt.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really is. I mean, would I trade it? No. But, nothing's perfect. And no matter who you are, which team you are, you can have the best players out there, but there are some things that other teams can pick on a little bit. And that just goes with it. I think the size. So when you say, and let me touch on what you said, first of all, that the strategy is to let teams into the lane. We call that funneling the dribbler into the lane, but most of the time you're funneling them to a rim protection or shot blocker. And I don't know that North Carolina's got that. So that's kind of a risk. And you see it in the NBA. You'll hear Charles Barkley or Kenny Smith talk about that all the time. You get in NBA games, and they say, well, this team, the reason they gave up 140 points, they have no rim protection. And that's a huge issue. So if we're letting teams into the lane, and Baycott just, he can block a few, but he plays under the rim. Jalen Washington could get a few, but, he's out there 6 to 8 minutes a game. It's not a team that's going to, that I just look, it's got a human eraser. So there's no Marvin Webster for you old school guys. back on that back end. Used to call him the human eraser. There's none of that. So
Morgan State, by the way, Morgan State.
So that's an issue. But going back to what we talked about, I didn't see Bay caught on guards as much. I think sometimes you can get caught there, but to me, North Carolina is just indiscriminately switching 1 through 4 automatically.
Yeah.
And there's 2 reasons they do this. Number one, that obviously is the strategy. But number 2, I think they're trying to speed up the game too. I think they want to guard fast. I think they do it to try to get teams in a hurry, to blow up sets and then get teams playing fast. And you can blow up sets by switching. Yeah. So they've got teams doing that. And one thing I've noticed too, and they did it late. Now, one thing, I think they are good teams switching. I really do. And against UConn, I was really impressed, especially in the second half, how aggressive they were to switch. I don't like passive switches. So I'm guarding a guy who can shoot the ball pretty well, Andrew. Your man's going to set a screen on me. So you've got to pick up my guy with the ball coming off the screen. And when he comes off, you're 5 feet back in the lane or 5 feet under the screen. Well, a guy comes up and he's playing horse, okay? So that's an issue. And I've seen a lot of teams do that. North Carolina doesn't do that. North Carolina is very aggressive. They switch over the top. You come off that thing, and, man, they're there waiting on you. And I think that's very impressive. Not many teams do that. They also, with that, they trap out of it. You saw them do that a lot with UConn. You saw them do it a lot against Florida State. They trapped. And against Florida State, it caused more turnovers than it did against UConn. But the thing is, you're doing all this switching, and UConn was very, very cerebral about this. They had a great game plan. And more times than not, they would end up getting Caravan, who's the power forward or 4, who could stretch it out and play inside, either slipping screens or screening. But either way, it caused a switch. And he's going straight to the block, and he's got 6-foot R.J. Davis or 6'1" Elliot Cadeau on him. He's 6'8", 6'9". Mm-hmm. So that's what they're running into a lot. So my suggestion has been, because North Carolina is small in the backcourt, and teams are going to try to take advantage of that, switch, but just don't let it be the 1 through 4 switch. And they may keep doing it. But they got to be aware if they do. This is what some of the things you're going to look for. Have guards switch with guards. Yeah. If Cadeau is in,
I agree with that.
And Ellie are in together, switch with each other, but don't switch off on the power forward. Don't switch off on Withers' guy or Harrison Ingram's guy. You switch guard to guard. The wings can switch wing to wing. Now, if you have Trimble in, they can switch 3 spots. But here's the thing now, you're going very small in the backcourt when you go these 3. So the big thing that I see, the issue defensively, is they're doing all this switching, and they're ending up with bad mismatches on the guards against the good teams. They're going to go straight to the block. Now, you talk about Dalton Connect, you talk about the player at Arkansas and Villanova. They've been having guys scoring in the 30s a lot on them. They've had one guy just really go off. I think a lot of times that's been, Baycott was the guy they went at Villanova, and they went at it from the guard spot with Connect and with the player from Arkansas, and I'm trying to remember his name. I can't off the top of my head. But so they do that. But that's one thing, too, is the size. Like you say, it's not a big lineup for North Carolina. So I'm looking at starting lineups for UConn and for North Carolina. UConn was bigger in 4 of the 5 spots. So you've got a lot of these teams like Connect. You've got a backcourt guy on him. He's just getting into the lane, going over the top of him. He's a 6'2" guard. So that's some of the things that they're running in, and it's a small backcourt, and it works offensively, and they've got to find a way to make it work all the time defensively.
Yeah, it's just appeared to me that the degree of intensity, aggressiveness with the switches has varied a lot. And, he's only played the bench 71 minutes the last 2 games. So I think a part of this, too, is he's got to use some of those guys. He's got to be committed to using them so they can be more aggressive with the switches. And that they've had a lot of success with the traps and the diamond and 1 press, but they had a 7-0 spurt against Connecticut with the diamond press. but he called it off because he could sense they were getting tired. And it was at that point that they just wilted. So part of this is also keeping his team fresh. And it'll be very interesting to see how he allocates bench minutes on Saturday, because Kentucky is going to play the same pace they play. They're going to race up and down. They're going to shoot a lot. They're going to force your guards to switch all over the place. It'll be very interesting to see how Hubert allocates those minutes to keep those guys fresh and just to give a different look out there on the court.
I thought the UConn game and the Florida State game from Saturday to Tuesday were almost parallel. They fell behind double figures in both games. They went to the press, got back in both. 33-8 run. They never backed it off against Florida State. And Hubert and Leonard Hamilton said that Hubert Davis had a great game plan going to that, because Florida State doesn't have a point guard. And they can't handle the ball. They have no skill level. So that was one thing. Connecticut was a whole different animal. So they were able to get a turnover there in the layup. They had like a 5-point trip with that, and they sped them up a little bit. But once Connecticut came out in the press break, got that set up, it wasn't an issue. And then they go back to half court and have problems. So the thing I've seen the last two games, North Carolina has been getting outplayed in the half court, and they've had to go to the press to try to change the momentum. I just don't know that that's sustainable. That's a concern. I don't know that that's sustainable against good teams. I don't know that they're going to be able to press Kentucky. Like you said, one thing you've got to remember about Kentucky, not only you talked about the switches and guys can score, for all the freshmen they got, they're the number one team in the country assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. So they are hard. They play fast, but they don't turn it over. They're hard to turn over.
Yeah, that's a great segue into that game. I'm going to bring up some Kentucky stuff right here for Carolina fans that might not know, and I think they follow them pretty closely. Kentucky's been an interesting team. And again, you and I have not talked about Kentucky yet, but the game against Kansas was a fantastic game. No mark against them for losing that one. St. Joe's in overtime. St. Joe's beat Villanova. They're 85th in Ken Palm, so they're a decent team. It's going to happen. I thought against Miami, they looked like world beaters, especially Miami had an 18-3 run, and Kentucky responded by saying, boom, they went like 20-2 on them. Then you lose to UNCW 5 days after UNCW gets blasted by 30 to App State. And then I thought they looked kind of meh against Penn over the weekend. So what is this Kentucky team? And is part of what I just outlined their youth showing that they're kind of wobble around a little bit because of that youth?
I think they've wobbled more on the defensive end. If you take, and when I look down here, I'm looking at some numbers I made. If you look, Kentucky is third in scoring at 90.6 points per game. North Carolina is 16th at 85.1. You put those two together, my math's correct, you're looking at 175.7 points per game. So, would you take an over of 170? It sounds crazy, but I expect it to be that type of game. I expect it to be up and down with a fast pace, and that's the way Kentucky's played. Possessions per game, Kentucky is 31st in the country in pace of play, 76.2 possessions per game. North Carolina is just one possession behind them at 75.1.
Yeah.
So that tells you how fast both teams play and how well they've scored. Kentucky's issue's been defensively. You remember me saying a while ago that I love the way North Carolina switches, that they're active and aggressive with their switches and they're not playing off and all that. And I said there's been some teams that I've watched that have done that. Well, you know who that team's been? One of the teams, it's been Kentucky. And that's how they got beat against Wilmington. I did a whole segment on that side of the defensive breakdowns. They lost to Wilmington, in my opinion, because defense or lack of. Late, young team, guys who, high school All-Americans who not necessarily been in a team defensive situation, so not hard-handed to defend. They could outscore people in high school. It's different now. Guys coming out of stances. Guys, when you play ice, and Kentucky likes to ice the side ball screen, so you ice that, and you end up with your post player up on the high side when the guard's not letting the screens on top too, and your defensive guard's not letting it come back up. Well, the big's supposed to be on the bottom side. When the big's up on the top side, miscommunications, and they're giving up layups on the baseline. switches late. And, to really shoot the ball, Penn could shoot the ball. So your switches are late. You're under, like I'm talking about, a guy come off, he's a 40% three-point shooter, and you call a switch, and I'm picking him up, and I'm 8 feet off of him when he comes off the screen. I can't get to him. It's a wide open shot.
Yeah.
And then late recognizing, late communicating, just late. Now, it was better against Penn for a half. They were, in the first half, they guarded much better. And then the second half, they came out for the first 10 minutes. Penn was, they could guard anybody. They're back to that again. Penn's on fire. So Penn goes up, cuts it back, and it's like a one possession. That is kind of something that I'm looking at from them is defensively. And like I said, they probably guarded pretty well 25, 30 minutes. So the challenge for any coach is, can you pick up the intensity level for 40 minutes? And the best teams do that. But offensively, I've got 6 players averaging double figures. They like to play fast. They got, a lot of high-scoring guards. Rob Dillingham, a lot of people know him. DJ Wagner, Reed Shepard, who has I know that Jonathan Gavani at ESPN's now got him as the number 6 projected pick in the NBA draft next year. And he was the lowest rated guy out of all these. Then Justin Edwards, at the small forward spot. Antonio Reeves is back. Was a big player for them last year, second leading scorer on the team. And he's picked right up where he's left off. So very talented backcourt, with probably 3 or 4 of those guys going in the first round of the draft next year. But the thing is now, they've been small. Their starting center has been, throughout the years, been Trey Mitchell, who started at UMass, went to Texas, then went to West Virginia. If Bob Huggins could have kept it between the lines, he'd still be up there. But he has a 4th team he's played on. He's kind of a stretch guy, but now that Trey Mitchell's back, and I think maybe Ogano Onyenso, a 7'1", 7'2", is going to be there as well. So now you've got 2 7-footers who are really athletic that hasn't been on the team because they've been injured. They both had lower leg injuries they suffered during off season. So all of a sudden now you've got 2 athletic 7-footers, and that offers them rim protection. So I think we were talking about the defense. I think the defense will come a long way because they are going to have rim protection, and they're going to have guards that are really aggressive and athletic and have a bulldog mentality, who are going to just pressure everything. If you get by, fine. We got erasers on the back end. The problem offensively, and I don't know that it's a problem, but John Calipari right now is trying to figure out, okay, we've just been flying up and down the court. We've had all these guards, and we've had a 3-point shooting center. It's really a forward who's been playing center. Now all of a sudden we're moving him over to the 4, and we got a 7-footer in there. So how do we go from playing 5 out and just flying up and down the floor, jacking up threes? So if you want to catch Kentucky while they're trying to figure out the offense, and they will, I think, figure it out because there's too much talent out there. And it's still a good offensive team, but it's you go from having all these guards to now a 7-footer on the floor. Like I said, playing the fast pace, shooting threes, racing up and down the floor. And now you're trying to figure out how to play a 6'9" power forward and a 7-footer in a post. And John Calipari said he didn't want to get into a high-low and take away the guard space. He's realized what he's got. So like I said, if you want to play them while they're trying to figure that out, now's the time, because they got a lot of talent over there offensively, inside and outside.
All right, so handicap this thing for us. Where does Carolina have an edge? Where does Kentucky have an edge? And is this one of those games where they could play 10 times and go 5-5?
Yeah,
that's kind of the way I see it. It's kind of the way I see it.
I'm horrible at wagering stuff anyway.
Don't want you to wager. I shouldn't have said handicap. Just tell us the matchups. Where does Carolina have an advantage? Where does UK have an advantage?
I know this. If I was a diehard fan and David Sis picked my team to win, I'd go jump off a bridge, because I know how
I just
how
keep
it's
my
going.
wallet closed. I keep my wallet closed.
I know how it's gone for me this year. But anyway, it's like I said, for North Carolina's standpoint, I think it's going to depend a lot on Cormac Ryan. I think it's going to be interesting to see. Now, Aaron Bradshaw, very talented. He's going to go in the first round. Big man for Kentucky. You've got Yenso back. It'll be his first game. It's going to be Aaron Bradshaw's third game. And you're talking about a freshman with Bradshaw that's not a big physical kind. He's the long, lean, wiry guy. How does he bang with Baycott inside? So I think it's going to come down to which other team can grab the lead, because I just don't think if North Carolina falls behind, I don't think they can press them. Well, the question's going to be, if they do. Because like I said, I think it's going to be a very, very fast-paced game. I think both teams get up and down the floor. I think both teams score a lot of points. And I see a lot of variables that are the same on each end, because I think both teams are better offensively than they are defensively. So a lot of points scored that may come down to 2 or 3 plays. You get late in the game, which team executes, which team gets a bounce, which team gets a shot. It may come down to that. So I just think you're going to have guys on both ends score a lot of points. I think you're going to have guys offensively. I think the offense is ahead of the defense. But I think Cormac Ryan, does he score for North Carolina? How does Kentucky guard Baycott inside? Even though they're talented, like I said, he is so much bigger, physically, broader than anybody that they've got. Can they bang with him inside? So I think those are some of the big factors. And it comes down to any of these games who makes shots. So if Ryan makes shots, if RJ Davis makes shots, obviously you look at that. And then who knows on Kentucky their guys, they've been making threes. They're a good 3-point shooting team.
Yeah, they are.
And, when I look at stats, Kentucky's third in the country at 41.4%. Well, North Carolina's 76, but you got to remember there's over 360 Division I teams. So they're in the upper 80, the 80th percentile at 35.9% shooting.
Yeah, Kentucky's also, because Kentucky also shooting like 58% overall from the floor so far.
Yeah, but I want to say this too.
They hit threes and get a lot of runouts.
A little bit. Numbers can be skewed a little bit because, in all honesty, North Carolina's schedule's been tough so far. If you look at Kentucky, they've played Kansas and Miami. Where North Carolina, we know the 4 teams. Arkansas, UConn, Tennessee, and Villanova,
and even Florida State, which is not awful. They defend at least some. Before we close this thing out, David, before we close this thing out, and I want to apologize to everybody. I've had terrible Wi-Fi, so it's been pretty spotty. So we appreciate y'all sticking through this. I wanted to ask you one final thing here. Is Harrison Ingram the most unique player on the floor Saturday?
Yes.
He's kind of like the one guy. There's nobody else like him out there.
Yeah, I really like him, man. They struck gold when they got him. And you knew he could do a lot of things. And everybody told me they'd seen him, coached against him and watched him up close and personal. And they said, look, he can really play. And the only thing I looked at it and I said, but can he shoot? You got guys leaving, and then if you bring guys in that can't shoot the ball, you're stuck with the same thing. Packed in defenses, and you can't get the ball in space. They cannot afford to bring in guys that can't shoot. And I look up, and I think he's shooting 46% from 3 so far. So he's been a godsend. And then all of a sudden, you look at him in his isolation game. So you talk about a guy right now as a matchup nightmare, but also he makes winning play. He's got that Leaky Black in him where he goes, gets a big offensive rebound. He gets a loose ball. He keeps the ball alive. He'll defend somebody. So, man, he is a guy that I really enjoy how he plays. And I'm going to tell you, as long as he keeps knocking down that outside shot, I think he's a guy that's very hard to match up for other teams, because you put a smaller guy on him, he's going to just back them down on the block. You put a bigger guy on him,
Yeah.
takes them outside, and then he's going to be able. He's going to defend. You know, at 6'7", he can still guard the 3, but he's a big, strong, physical guy. So you know he can guard the 4 too. So he doesn't get hit with the same mismatches on the defensive end that he causes on offensive.
He chuckled when somebody asked him if there's a little Barkley in his game. And he didn't chuckle as if to say it was a silly notion. I think he sort of appreciated the comparison a little bit, which anybody would. But I do think there is an aspect of that in his game. David, let's go ahead and cut this thing because we've had some terrible Wi-Fi tonight. The choppiest daily drop in the history of THI. But everyone wants, a lot of people have been asking when I was going to do another video with you. We're going to be doing them regularly now that we're in the meat of the basketball season. And we'll have a recruiting one coming up here over the holidays, coming up the next couple of weeks as well. For David Sisk, I'm AJ. We appreciate you stopping by.